Hello my nakamatachi, this is JoyGirl, and let's talk about chapter 1025, which is a chapter that brought some really great action back into One Piece, but also a chapter that really highlights how great of a storyteller Oda really is. Oda's storytelling structure is something that we talk a lot about, with his setups at the beginning and then building up throughout the chapter before a final payoff at the end, but we got double the excitement in this chapter because this chapter was essentially split up into two parts following two pairs of characters, and then these two parts culminated into one with the two threads meeting at the end. But before we discuss each thread, let's congratulate our JoyFleet Discord artwork competition winners for this week. And for the first time, we actually have a three-way tie for first place. The theme was Chibi Yamato, and these are the wonderful creations of our winners. Jiatsuki with a very cute, very bright and happy Yamato, which is very nice to see because seeing Yamato so pure and joyful are always golden moments, and the artwork looks like some of the shots that we got of Yamato in this chapter. Libra, on the other hand, with a much more stern Yamato in a very Nickelodeon art style. This artwork reminded me of The Fairly Odd Parents, which was a show I loved when I was younger, so it struck up some nostalgia for me. And last but not least, Pukiaki back at it again with some hilarious comic strips. And if I say so myself, somewhat inspired by a certain warrior who uses lint rollers as the primary choice of weapon. And if you want to check out the rest of the great artworks that were submitted this week, then make sure to stick around for the whole review because those artworks are going to be sprinkled in throughout the video. Now let's get to the review. I want to start with the Yamato and Kaido discussion first. One, because Yamato was just so damn impressive in this chapter, and also because their segment picks up where chapter 1024 left off. When we get to the rooftop in this chapter, it seems like the last double spread panel of the clash between Kaido and Yamato from the previous chapter has been portrayed again from the reverse so that we see Yamato in the foreground instead. And you'll know from the last review that I spent quite a while discussing the significance in the way that Oda uses composition in these one-on-one clash moments, so I appreciated getting to also see this from the other perspective of Yamato's. It really enhanced the feeling of the scene. Yamato performed really well against Kaido and is really giving me more reasons why I want to see Yamato join the crew. Unsurprisingly, it seems like Kaido was the one who was able to hit Yamato after their Conqueror's clash that we saw last week, but surprisingly, Yamato has some sort of armor, and the way Yamato used this ability, prompting Kaido to think Yamato had opted to go on the defensive, but then actually using this defensive tactic to actually launch an offensive attack by jumping out of the armor, showcased Yamato's proficiency in combat. Yamato, recognizing Kaido's strength, knew that the clash would be to his advantage, and so instead opted for a different, longer, and setup method of an attack, which proved to be successful because this decision allowed Yamato to successfully land a blow on Kaido. And during the sequence, we're introduced to two of Yamato's attack names, both of which seem quite meaningful. The Kagami Yama, which refers to a Japanese puppet play which was adapted for kabuki theater, is the story of revenge that takes place inside the women's quarters within a samurai mansion. This allows Yamato to create some sort of a mirror double as a shield, and combined with the name, if Yamato decides to drop the Odin shtick by the end of the arc, then we can look back at this moment and think, wow, this was a great metaphor, naming the attack after a play set within women's quarters, with Yamato coming out of it and leaving the clone or the Odin 2.0 persona behind, whilst becoming her own powerful self. The other, Himomorogiri, referring to sacred altars in Shintoism, which could mean glacial slash, continues this ice theme for Yamato, and really for me draws out the beautiful relationship between Ace and Yamato through their opposite elemental relationship of fire and ice. On a more straightforward note, Yamato is the second character we saw bring Kaido to the ground and also made him bow down since Luffy, who managed it when he figured out how to infuse Conqueror's Haki into his attacks. I've mentioned before that Yamato and Luffy are close in strength, and this chapter gave me more reason to strengthen that thought. And if we take some time to really appreciate Yamato's fighting skills, I'm not too sure whether the Viz release will actually clarify this for me, but during the Himorogiri attack, it seemed like Yamato had let go of the Kanabo before catching it by the next panel, and I just found the pose so slick with Yamato holding the Kanabo from the side whilst watching Kaido fall face first, which really seemed to have angered Kaido because he starts to go on a bit of a verbal rampage, which gives out extremely intriguing tidbits of information as well as a mini flashback moment. The first and perhaps biggest reveal is of Kaido and Yamato's race, which is suggested could be that they are part of the Oni race. Kaido being an Oni is a theory that I held a while back, but I largely discarded the idea once we found out what Kaido's devil fruit is. But this chapter seems to confirm this. But it's also interesting to note that one of our Japanese-speaking JoyFleet members actually said the Japanese doesn't seem to imply that Kaido and Yamato are of a different race. So I'm really interested in seeing the Viz translation and doing a bit more research into this, because the rest of Kaido's dialogue actually seems to suggest that they are part of the different race. Kaido doesn't seem to like humans and distances himself and Yamato from them. He considers them literally beneath him or their race, and this fits with what we know of him as a character. Perhaps the reason why he's built up a full Zoan crew is to live amongst those closest to his kind, because he doesn't recognize the strength of humans. And this isn't the first time that Kaido has made this distinction between himself and humans either. In chapter 1013, Kaido noted that the problem with humans was that they can't give up. And at this point, it seemed less clear whether Kaido was suggesting that he himself wasn't actually human, but it seems almost palpable in this chapter that's what he means. It also sounds like Kaido is speaking from experience. Whatever Oda is doing with stretching out until we see Kaido's backstory is really working. Every little piece of dialogue is so well crafted and inspires a lot of intrigue. If Yamato is giving me more and more reasons for joining the Straw Hats, Kaido is giving me more and more reasons to see his backstory, which we are of course still waiting on, but in the meantime we're getting little bits and pieces of Yamato's, this time showing us yet again another reason for Yamato's present actions against Kaido. Adding to the tragic past we saw last chapter, finding out in this chapter that everyone who was nice to Yamato during childhood was taken away, and that Yamato witnessed the horrific consequences that befell those who showed compassion or kindness, and Kaido using this to say that Yamato is all alone is an act of cruel deceit, because it was Kaido who did this to Yamato. We know Yamato was cared for, but Kaido took them away and was insistent on making Yamato feel alone. Yamato is alone because of Kaido. So Kaido insisting Yamato is all alone and Yamato insisting the opposite was given a beautiful payoff in the end when Luffy and Momonosuke showed up. And we will go back to this later, so let's first discuss Luffy and Momonosuke. The first thing I want to quickly mention is that Momo's not using his flame cloud ability to fly up and is actually just flying. So perhaps this is a setup for that ability to come into play later, such as when he needs to hold Onigashima up from falling. I love how Oda really thinks about every detail of his series. By not maturing Momo mentally, it makes the interaction with Luffy better, adding a flavor of anticipation whilst retaining the strong sense of familiarity between the two. And it also makes sense that this is the way that the Juku Juku no Mi works, because if it had the ability to age up an individual's mentality, how exactly would that work? Momo wouldn't have had the 20 years of experience to form the matured thoughts and mindset, so we actually don't know what his matured brain would result in. If Momo's brain had also been aged up, we may not see Momo struggle to get up to the roof, which is something we saw beautifully symbolically as well as quite literally in this chapter. We saw Momo going up to the rooftop floor by floor, literally building up his courage. And Momo going through each floor was a metaphor for Momo's journey, slowly but gradually overcoming his fear. And by the time that they finally reach the rooftop, it's now time for Momo to really man up. And not only was this progression going up floor by floor a meaningful way to portray Momo's development, it also provided a nice, quick and effective way to show everyone's reaction to the process with interesting additional dialogue from those inside the dome, which could carry into their respective fights. Some of the crew saw Luffy back up to his usual energetic self at the forefront of the chaos, and some of the members of the Alliance seeing him in this state will likely serve as a major morale boost, with the opposite effect for the Beast Pirates who were shocked and confused. We got another Queen reaction face in the process, which served as a nice bit of comedy, which was a rare moment in this chapter. But my favorite was Marco smiling in the background behind Izzo. Apart from increasing my belief that Marco has checked out for this battle, and unless Marco is similarly invigorated in seeing Luffy back up to fight, it seemed like he was just content to watch the show. So it just makes me wonder whether he's smiling because he knows of the prophecy. Because you all know about my theory that Toki is alive and the possible meeting between Marco and Toki. But if we revisit the Momotaro tale, which is only one character or creature away from being fulfilled right now, I think Marco smiling could be seen as a good sign that he may have some left in the tank for another round of battle to complete the Momotaro legend. But the idea of Hiyori taking the pheasant's place instead, as pointed out by Uteron, in my opinion, seems to also make sense due to the emotional weight the character would carry. I mean, if it were up to me, I would actually bend this even further and have Zoro and Sanji, Luffy's wings, as the surprise representation of the pheasant. And then this would then give the volume 100 cover another meaning, with everyone present in that cover in direct opposition to Kaido, with Ace serving as a spiritual guide or boost for Luffy and Yamato. But that's just my Straw Hat bias speaking. And if I'm spending a little time talking about agendas, then I may as well also drop that Luffy's dialogue of seeing some shadowy figures on the roof. Well, I just want to say that this isn't the last time we're going to be hearing about some shadowy figures, because you all know I'm expecting to see the Straw Hats fulfill that role. And I'd like to think Momo breaking through all those walls and floors is one of the final setups for us to see the Straw Hats versus Kaido happen. If Onigashima ends up collapsing, then it opens up a possibility of bringing all the main players for that theory into one space, and having such an event as the Nine Shadows out in the open in front of everyone will then have everyone witnessing the prophecy, which will be very ideal, especially for those who had switched sides. But enough of the agenda push and back to everyone's reactions, because another response that stood out for me is Shinobu, whose solemn composure was just so contrasted to the last time we saw her. Makes me wonder if that's because she saw the adult Momo in human form, really resembling Oden, and so she knows that such a sight is one that will not lose. And another interesting update that we got through this sequence was on the Law and Kid front against Big Mom. Seeing Kid looking pretty healthy has me wondering what that means for Killer and Hawkins in that case. Has Killer just been unwilling to damage Hawkins in any way? And seeing Big Mom also sparked the question about the Oni race again for me, because to the best of my knowledge, Big Mom doesn't have an Oni in her crew, and I wonder if that's one of the races that she's after. On that note, Big Mom doesn't have the Giants or Lunarians either, and if Kaido's Oni is indeed a separate race, then this in turn makes me more curious about Big Mom's relationship to Kaido, and whether this is another reason added to the list of seeing a potential betrayal in the works. As for the chapter though, I also have to say that it's hilarious whenever this supernova trio are together. There's always some comedy, no matter how serious the situation they're in, because this was another one of those rare moments where Oda input some comedy in this chapter by way of Luffy's hilarious face. But back to the action and hype, because this all culminated into the final confrontation. Momo becoming the mature leader that Wano needs was so evident in these last few pages. Whilst he had been flying with his eyes closed the entire time, at just the mention of Kaido's name, he knows he now has to open his eyes. Quite a literal representation of having been blinded by fear to actually facing his fears wide-eyed by the end. Which is how we got that awesome face-off between the two pairs of two kinds, because what we first see is the glorious combo attack of the two snakes. Luffy and Momo surprising Yamato for that combined attack between the snake-themed Luffy and Yamato, whilst literally landing a hit. What I really appreciated was, again, it was also a symbolic slap to Kaido's face. It was the perfect response to Kaido, who had been taunting that Yamato is all alone, by showing the exact opposite. I love details like this that are so subtly woven into the story. And not only was this shown through the combo attack, but Luffy even acknowledges Yamato's help. It was just so heartwarmingly beautiful to see Yamato's bright reaction and joy, knowing that allies had arrived. And like Marco, Yamato's smile is full of assurance, knowing full well that Luffy is here to fulfill the prophecy. The excitement in Luffy and Yamato to see each other was just such a touching moment that gets more meaningful each time I look at it. It really gives me the feeling of the excitement when the Straw Hats are happy to be reunited with Luffy or to each other. Like I said, this chapter really amped up the claims of Yamato for Nakama for me, which is really ironic that Kaido kept insisting that Yamato will never be accepted, because within the fandom, everyone wants Yamato to join. In the minds of the majority, Yamato is already an accepted Straw Hat. Although whether that will happen will depend on whether Luffy accepts Yamato, because he is the glue of the series, like how he was the glue that pieced this last segment together in this chapter, coming up with Momo delivering the combo attack with Yamato, and then inspiring again Momo to stand up to Kaido. Luffy standing on top of Momo's head was such a hype scene, although it was a bit fun for me to notice that his hair is flowing backwards, looking quite wavy. It's the most that Luffy has resembled his father, Monkey D. Dragon, and it's funny that we're seeing this on a panel where he just happens to be featured with two dragons facing off. Also on that note, with the comments that Kaido has made about humans and other races, now that Momonosuke is a dragon and Yamato is an Oni, it has me wondering whether we'll also be seeing Luffy turn into a beast of his own, perhaps by way of a new gear. In which case, a creature that could rival a dragon, Tiger Man comes to mind, though Luffy is already representative of the monkey, so it would be cool to see him unleash into a massive gorilla. Or maybe Luffy will even be the human that just breaks through Kaido's perception of humans. This isn't happening yet though, because Kaido's own strength and experience is something really highlighted in the next pair of a kind. Dragon Momo facing off Dragon Kaido is the other epic double spread panel of this chapter, and I have to admit that I was expecting to see Kaido a bit more alarmed to see Momo, but his response in turn really speaks to his character. Because whilst we will give props to Momo for his showing of inner strength in this chapter, we really gotta give our props to Kaido as well. This is the strongest creature in the world, unfazed at seeing another dragon. The title of the chapter, Twin Dragons, being a reference to Koizumi Junsaku's ceiling painting at the Hodo Hall, which Oda has visited, was adapted for Momonosuke and Kaido in their dragon forms up on the rooftop like a ceiling. And Oda appropriated this artwork brilliantly to show the stark contrast between Momo and Kaido. Momo's eyes are almost bulging out of shock, whereas Kaido's is more of a curious squint. The difference in experience and maturity is clear. The simpler, less detailed drawing of Momo says greenhorn, whereas Kaido looked weathered with experience, with the extra details on his face seeming almost like wrinkles. But this is a good time to focus on Momo's development, because more so than his acrophobia, Momo's true fear was of Kaido, who instilled the fear of heights into him in the first place. And we've seen the extent of this fear in the past, with even the mere sight of Kaido being enough to trigger Momo into involuntarily transforming into a dragon. So Momo facing Kaido eyes wide open is perhaps the best demonstration of his maturity and increasingly growing courage, which is strengthened by Momo's dialogue. Another great way that Momo's development was shown to us is that throughout the chapter, the font of Momo's dialogue was always shaky, indicating Momo's trembling fear, even as he mustered up the courage to speak in those last pages. But in that final moment, as he declares his name as Kozuki Momonosuke, the man who will be shogun of Wano, his words ring clear and strong. And the final panels of the close-up to each dragon face is a great tease of what we can expect to see incoming. Momo is the young, determined challenger, whereas Kaido is an amused champion. And whilst we have seen some of Momo's great development and maturity in this chapter, I can feel that there is more coming from Momo, where he will actually live out and demonstrate one of his first words of this chapter, that samurais fear nothing. I want to see this moment where Momo doesn't just use strong words to hide behind his fears to seem tough, but actually mean it. I want to get to a point where Momonosuke doesn't need any words. I just want to feel, wow, samurais really have no fear, which is a moment that I believe we will witness and perhaps become part of a story that Usopp tells the octopus to chronicle, as we saw in the fan requested cover page, which was a really fun cover page, seeing Usopp a captain in his own right with his own long-nosed Jolly Roger. And we also have to mention part 3 of the poster for the global top 50 One Piece characters, which we also got as one final full poster spread, which was just amazing. Really a great spread that really brings up a lot of nostalgia at seeing all of these characters, reminding us of how far the series has come, as well as always highlighting Oda's great talent in being able to fit over 50 characters in this one spread with such mastery of composition. And with this, we'll bring our chapter review to a close. Let me know what you think by leaving a comment below. Don't forget to like and share the video, and please don't forget to subscribe, because we do have a One Piece break this coming week, and I would love to fill that void with some more One Piece content. And on that note, in lieu of our usual chapter discussion streams, we're going to have Mr Morj join us for our next Let's Talk Wano episode, so make sure to check out the link below so that you don't miss out. Also remember to join our JoyFleet Discord server for more One Piece related fun, and you can also become a patron for a special role within that server. Thank you to our patrons who help support the channel. This is JoyGirl, and I'll see you again soon.